Who gon' take it there? 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 Electricity, 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 electricity. You know what's in the air. 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 It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility. It's possibility.
All right, so Sam Harris came up recently on the Joe Rogan Experience. I can't remember what episode it was, but a recent one where Joe was talking about the political landscape, people he talks to, doesn't talk to, said that Sam Harris doesn't want to talk to him because Joe has said the only way he'll talk to Sam Harris is if Sam Harris talks to Brett Weinstein first. So this is all very gossipy, and that's a very, strong arm kind of move on the part of Joe. But essentially, Brett Weinstein is one of the main anti-vax guys who has supplied a lot of the conspiracy theories that Joe Rogan has been espousing on his podcast throughout COVID up through till now. He still believes Brett Weinstein was right about everything. And so Joe feels that Sam Harris, because he has correctly dismissed Brett Weinstein as being a charlatan and an idiot, Joe feels that Sam Harris should have to debate him on the issue of vaccines and back that up. Sam Harris refuses to do that. So I caught this little clip that Sam Harris did talking about why he chooses not to talk to certain people, and there's an interesting array of figures that get mentioned here. He talks about why he wouldn't talk about somebody like Hasan Piker, for example, but then why he would talk to Ben Shapiro and Tucker Carlson. And he talks about how he wants to talk to Joe Rogan, but not Brett Weinstein, how some of these people are more worth it than others. And remember that Sam Harris is a liberal. He has kind of aligned himself over the years in that sort of intellectual dark web space with a lot of these new conservative types like Jordan Peterson, but he also at a certain point distanced himself from that and didn't want to be considered that because he isn't as right-leaning as most of them, except specifically on foreign policy and issues of the Middle East, where Sam Harris, I would argue, is quite right-wing. So we'll get to that in a second. Here's him a couple of times touching on Hasan Piker, just as a random example. No one even brings him up other than Sam Harris, but here he is talking to someone like Hasan Piker to Ben Shapiro or Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, it's just going to be an exercise in my attempting to showcase their errors, which I already understand to be errors, right? So someone who doesn't really understand jihadism at all and doesn't believe in it and thinks it's all economics and politics and bluffing. Okay, I can get that person on for another 2-hour round of brain damage, but it really is just brain damage. Who are we talking about? I mean, like I'm going to talk to someone like Hasan Piker. Would that be fun? Not really. I mean, I don't think anyone should be listening to this guy. I'm going to talk to Ben Shapiro. I anticipate that being a potentially bad conversation, at least for half of it. I mean, half of it will agree about certain things, but part of it will be exposing a fair amount of daylight between us around Trump and current American politics. So I'm going to go into that thinking this. We both might get somewhat uptight in this conversation, at least for part of it. And I'm not avoiding it. I think it's useful because Ben is a serious enough person with a big enough audience that it's useful to try to kind of make some sense in his direction. To talk to someone like, I don't know, again, I just brought up Hasan Piker at random. Someone like him, I mean, he's just kind of a performance artist. I mean, he's a deeply confused, I think, fairly amoral, fairly juvenile person in his ethics, right? I mean, he's just a bit of a nutcase, and dishonest, and so it's just such a mess. I mean, there's so much bad faith that you have to anticipate going into a conversation like that. My first question is, why do it? I mean, because it can stand the chance of being genuinely confusing, certainly to anyone who's sort of in his audience, right? Because there's just so much. It's asymmetric warfare. It's so much easier to make a mess than to clean it up. The Monk debates, I think they asked me to debate Tucker Carlson, and I was surprised to find myself saying yes without any reservation, really, because Tucker has become such a fixture in our politics. But that seems to have evaporated. So I don't know what happened there. I'm sure he said no.
It's interesting his layout of the situation here. Not all that surprising. Like I said, he used to be affiliated with the sort of intellectual dark web type of thing because he was kind of on the anti-woke. We're going to talk about certain things. He likes Charles Murray. He's dipped his toes in race science a little bit. So he exists in an odd space where he is liberal, and most of the time, especially on issues of Trump or the current state of the conservative movement, he's espousing a pretty liberal critique. Standard liberal, if not very well articulated. And, you'll hear that later when he's talking about Joe Rogan. He's saying things that most liberal or left-leaning people would say about Joe Rogan. But specifically on the issue of war, foreign policy, and like I said, the Middle East, he is consistently in favor of U.S. intervention and U.S. use of force against essentially Muslim countries, Muslim-run countries, whether they be theocracies or dictatorships or whatever. He views essentially the Islamic approach to government and the Islamic religion as an inherent threat to Western society, to society in general, the planet. And so, like I said, on that issue, he's pretty much exactly aligned with the far right in terms of how he views Muslim people and seeing them as overall collectively a threat when it comes to issues of like how a country governed that way would use nuclear weapons or weapons of any kind. That's the argument Sam Harris has been making for a long time. And so that's why he's willing to talk to Ben Shapiro about this, because him and Ben Shapiro on that are exactly aligned, and only on more social issues would they have any type of divergence. Tucker Carlson's a little bit more curious because, frankly, Tucker Carlson and Hasan Piker's views, or at least what they've been espousing lately, are pretty similar when it comes to Israel. Now, Tucker is only flirting with that type of rhetoric, and he's finding ways to dig deeper, and he is also much more attached to a religious framework than somebody like Hasan Piker. So that's the interesting thing about Sam saying he instantly, without thinking, said, yes, I would talk to Tucker Carlson because he's an interesting, important figure in our discourse right now, etc. But when it comes to Hasan, who's more secular, it's more so this caricature that gets painted. He's wild, he's crazy. He's making it sound like walking into an argument with Hasan would be like, going in with some entertainer who's going to be wacky and crazy that it's impossible to have a normal conversation with. Now, if you said that talking to Hasan, he can be a little dodgy, he's good enough with his words that he can kind of move around questions sometimes, or that he might be a little bit deceptive in his use of language on the spot, especially in debates, I think that would be a fair critique. If he had said that, I would say, I guess that's fair. But this idea that Hasan is a crazy person, I think, is a way to avoid the fact that what Hasan is saying is on the leading edge of even what somebody like Tucker Carlson is going to come out and say. That's just the truth of it. So people who want to believe that Hasan is a crazy person and have various issues with him, that's fine. But ultimately, he is continually building the rhetoric that is effectively harming Israel's standing with a lot of young people and just in the political space in general. He does have a lot of impact there. And Sam Harris knows that, but he just views the message of somebody like Hasan Piker as more pernicious to his project, which is, I'm not sure exactly. I think he's trying to reach more liberal types with the hyper security state focused approach that he has adopted to politics. I think he feels that the national security state of the United States is like an imperative, and it's this grand innovation in human prosperity and safety. And so when America does things like bombing school children or, preemptive strikes or kidnapping Nicolas Maduro, etc., the people running those systems know that those people would do something worse if we didn't intervene in that way. Sam Harris is fully on board with that argument and has been making it for years. So that's just an important thing to keep in mind about him ideologically. So in this next clip, he talks about Brett Weinstein. The co-host brings up that Joe has said that he won't talk to Sam Harris unless Sam Harris talks to Brett Weinstein, and Sam explains his reasons for not talking to a person like Brett Weinstein. So here's that.
Well, Rogan has said he doesn't want to talk to you publicly until you've debated Brett Weinstein. Is that something you consider doing?
Oh, well, no. I mean, for the same reasons I wouldn't debate RFK Jr. I mean, it's just, it's very disconcerting not to know whether someone has lost their mind, right? Like, because when you look at someone like Brett speak, he just seems to be the picture of reasonableness, right? I mean, he's not getting blown around by his emotional life, or certainly not in any obvious way when he's certainly not on a podcast with Rogan. And yet the things he says are equivalently crazy. And the certitude with which he says them, it's totally indefensible, right? So, I mean, you just you take his recent appearance on Rogan and you stick his claims into any LLM, and what you get is just a litany of obvious errors. And I did that for Joe. I sent him a link to my, ChatGPT session. Like, Joe, just here's a sanity check. Listen to what the robots say about what Brett was giving you on this most recent podcast. And he didn't seem to want to do that. So he's still convinced that Brett was right about everything, though Brett thinks that 17 million people were killed outright by the vaccines. Unlike many of these guys, I'm not going to pretend it's my wheelhouse, knowing that I can, be a quick study and sound like I know what I'm talking about. I'm not an immunologist. I'm not a virologist.
Okay, so like I said, this is where what Sam Harris says about Brett Weinstein, Joe Rogan, becomes pretty similar to what I would say about them, except he's making this argument here about why he doesn't think it's worth it to debate Brett Weinstein. And an important part of it that he keeps coming back to is that it's not his area of expertise. So while he could do the preparation required to have a conversation like that just for the sake of that debate, it wouldn't be the same as like actually projecting expertise, and it also wouldn't be the same as having a good debate about it. Like, that's not really the answer. The answer would be for him to debate somebody who is an expert on those subjects. But obviously, Joe doesn't think that way. Joe just likes the sport of it, which Sam will mention later on. And honestly, I think the right way to handle this would be to just take the challenge of it and do the debate. Because if you're saying that you can do the preparation necessary to debate somebody like Brett Weinstein, who is also not an expert on the subject he's talking about, then why not just do it for the sake of playing the game that Brett Weinstein and Joe Rogan are already playing? And I get that Sam is pretending that he doesn't want to play that game, but it's not true, because he is already. He plays the same game as all of them. He's doing a podcast. You could argue that the format of podcasting and talking loosely about various subjects that you have varying levels of knowledge about, which is what Sam Harris is doing, that alone is irresponsible. So he already is playing the game. So he might as well try to do it in a way that could make an impact. When Eric Weinstein, who is not a prestigious scientist, debated Terrence Howard after Terrence Howard promoted all of his weird bullshit theories on Joe Rogan, people were really, really on that. They were riding high on the idea that Terrence Howard had, put forward some real new revolutionary idea of looking at the world. And by talking to somebody who just knows a little bit about the scientific process and why some of these ideas he was talking about aren't valid, it killed that narrative a lot. Now, there's still people out there who will tell you that Terrence Howard is a genius, and Terrence Howard still mostly believes all the same things. Like, it didn't convince him, and there's a lot of people that it didn't convince, but it dampened the potency of the narrative that Terrence Howard had. And I do think it's possible for Sam Harris to do something similar. I mean, at this point, the conversation is over, and the cultural debate has been lost specifically because of that, because of sheepishness to get in the ring on an issue like vaccines. Even if, you're not an expert, you're debating somebody who's not an expert. Them's the rules. That's how this game works. So you might as well just play that game, unless you don't think you would perform well in that debate. And you say, I could brush up and know what I need to know and pretend to know what I'm talking about. But maybe he feels like he actually isn't good enough at doing that he would hold up well, and that the worst outcome of a situation like that would be making the person look better at the end of it because you didn't perform well. That's the opposite of what you want. So I could understand if that's part of the hesitation there. But really, it's the same sheepishness to get in the ring, and you definitely see that on the issue of Israel and the Middle East, where, you know, this growing critique of what America is doing there is there. It does exist. Just like the anti-vax, that critique grew and became a cultural movement. And, you know, the war stuff is what a lot of these centrist types want to do is they want to tie harsh criticism of Israel and sharp criticism of Israel, the surveillance state, the intelligence apparatus. They want to tie that to conspiracy theorizing like anti-vax stuff. And that's what they're currently trying to do by grouping people like Hasan in with people like Nick Fuentes and Brett Weinstein. So the same cowardice is on display of wanting to marginalize these people, actively recognizing you don't have enough cultural power anymore to marginalize them, and still refusing to talk to them. So you're just solidifying the fact that you are losing cultural relevance and they are not. So here's a last clip where Sam Harris mentions a recent clip that was going around of Theo Von that I talked about, where Theo Von is spazzing out about the current state of things and Joe takes it into conspiracy land.
I think I sent you this clip of that the algorithm served me of Joe talking to Theo Von, and Theo was, you know, just kind of melting down around his anxiety about everything. It seemed super worried about the war in Iran and you know, worried about Israel. I guess. I mean, I forget about some of the specifics of the clip, but they went on for like 10 minutes. Kind of casting doubt on everything, and then they seemed to have a lot of time for some CIA conspiracy theory, yeah. which you know was getting delivered to them on looked like a, you know, a short YouTube clip or a TikTok video by someone they liked, and, you know, it was probably a rehash of MK Ultra or some, you know, old story about the CIA putting LSD in the water. I mean, the image I got is just of two kind of pyromaniacs just lighting matches, you know, on a landscape that they had spent years soaking in gasoline, right? It's like and I mean, and this really is it's relevant how large the audience is for this. It's relevant at just how much cultural damage is being done every time these guys basically play the just asking questions routine on, you know, socially combustible.
Yeah, so like I said, Sam
topics.
Harris sounds pretty similar to me on this issue when it comes to critiquing
like athletes,
Joe.
Right?
I agree with him about this sort of like runaway culture of podcasting and how it's become corrosive. Sam Harris is best understood as like an Obama-era neoliberal, and he's a war hawk. And he's more far right than a lot of neoliberals even would be when it comes to preemptive use of military power and, you know, aggressively pursuing our agenda on the world stage. So the reality is that just places him at odds with the current strain of like popular understanding of politics. It's just true. He's right about vaccines. He's right about science. He's right about his critique here of these right-wing guys. But his analysis of the Middle East is virtually the same one that waltzed us into this war. And that's why Sam Harris likes the Iran war. He likes the regime change. This is the type of thing that he's been arguing for throughout his career. And so to dismiss offhand criticisms of people who are saying, not only do we regularly get into these wars on behalf of Israel because of intelligence they're giving us or some kind of weird quid quo pro thing that the average person doesn't know about, but also we keep losing and getting stuck. Like, this isn't working for Americans. And so people are feeling scammed by that. They feel scammed by Donald Trump because of it. They felt scammed by Democrats for a long time because of it. And people like Donald Trump came along and articulated that scam. which made people feel like they could trust him more than they could trust Democrats. So the technocrats like Sam Harris and others at Third Way, who can make very convincing arguments on liberalism when it comes to some of these social science issues that they've zeroed in on, they are waiting in the wings to try to take back over politics when the ability of Trump to maintain power falls away, which it looks like eventually it will. He doesn't have the political capital to sustain what he's doing. And so people like Sam Harris are hoping that, you know, the liberals, the responsible neoliberals, are going to be the ones who take back control. And it just is imperative that the damage that is being done by Donald Trump is not inherited by people who think like Sam Harris, because they will rebuild the system to be worse than it is now.
When it comes to Kanye, I'm not seeing any reason to think that his beliefs have shifted even a tiny inch, but it's possible that he's back on this medication that's making him feel like it's less worth it to be the one dedicating his life to Hitler and going and Sieg Heilen and Nazi insignias and all the shit that he was doing.